Former U.S. Senator Robert Bennett.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. It's a little early in the morning. I'll do my best to keep you awake. I will talk about whatever you want to talk about when we get to the question and answers. But my assignment here is to prepare you for your assignment here, which is to engage in a constitutionally protected practice that has been denigrated in the press and the movies as something truly evil. You are all going to become lobbyists. Now, if you look at the First Amendment, that it outlines all of the rights of expression, it starts out with religion. Congress shall make no law with respect to religion. It talks about freedom of the press and freedom of speech, but right there in the First Amendment, along with freedom of religion and freedom of the press and freedom of the speech, is the right to petition the government for redress of your grievances. And that is 18th century language for lobbying. Now, all of you have grievances. Just ask your wife or ask your husband. It will explain. All of you have grievances, and all of you have grievances with the government, and you are here to petition the government for redress of those grievances. Now, I was a lobbyist before I became a senator. I don't recommend that, because when I was a lobbyist, lobbyists did not get paid as much as senators. Now, lobbyists get paid a whole lot more than senators after they have been senators. So I recommend you do it that way if you're looking for a career as a lobbyist. But I learned a number of things. I think I was a pretty effective lobbyist. And as a senator, I had a constant stream of lobbyists coming into my office, and I quickly was able to separate the good ones from the bad ones. So I'm going to try to give you this morning, out of my own experience and my dealing with them from the other side of the table, some tips on how to be a good lobbyist rather than a bad lobbyist. The very first rule of lobbying, the currency with which lobbyists deal, is good information. I know in the movies they deal with liquor, they deal with women, they deal with bribes. Well, that's Jack Abramoff, and he's in jail. And I don't think you want to do that. But the way lobbying really works, if you're going to be effective at it, and the most effective lobbyist I ever knew was a man by the name of Bryce Harlow, who was legendary in this town for one thing above all, and that was his integrity. Bryce never told a member of Congress anything that wasn't absolutely true. And members of Congress knew that if Bryce Harlow came into their office and sat down and explained something, they could depend on it. They could know that he was giving them accurate information. They could use it. They could put it in a speech. They could write it into legislation, and they would never be embarrassed. If you have that kind of relationship with the member of Congress or senator that you will call on while you're here, you will be an effective lobbyist. If you don't know the member, see if you can find somebody who does, who can vouch for you. My professional lobbying career, I lobbied for that sinister American institution known as the J.C. Penney Company. And in those days, every member of Congress had a J.C. Penney store in his district. And I discovered at least half of them had worked at J.C. Penney at one point in their careers, selling shoes or whatever it was. And as a consequence, before I would go to see Senator X, I would call the J.C. Penney manager in his home state and say, "Do you know Senator X? And he would always say, well, yeah, sure. I'd say, will you please call him in advance of my visit, tell him I'm coming, and vouch for me as someone who is credible. The best way to destroy your relationship with a member, of course, the reverse side of this, is to tell him something or her something that's not true. To tell him something that gives you a temporary advantage in the political environment of the moment. But if he depends upon it, if he puts it in a speech, if he relies upon it as he's drafting legislation and then finds out you misled him, you'll never get back in that office again. And no amount of campaign contributions or any other thing that we see connected to lobbyists is going to change his mind. So be sure when you go in to see a member of Congress that everything you have to say about your particular institution, about your particular financial problems, about the vision you want to convey that you're hoping he or she will help you achieve in your career is true and dependable and accurate. And that if the congressman's staff decides to check out what you're saying, that it will check out exactly right so that you get the reputation. Well, if I want to know what's going on in community colleges, if I want to know what's going on in this portion of the educational world, why don't I call, fill in your name? Because I know that she will tell me the truth. I know, I'm acquainted with her, that I know that I'll get accurate information. That's the first rule of lobbying. You catch in this the implication that this is not a one-time event. People show up in my office. I had to keep reminding myself of this as a senator. This is a little pull back the curtain and let you see what your life would be like if you decided to run for office. You might suffer from a little congenital brain damage if that's your urge, but people show up like you, and they say, Senator, we're here to talk to you about our issues, and we very much appreciate your time, and we're not going to take too much of the time because this is an annual event. We're only here one day out of a year. And I'm sitting there saying, yeah, and there are 4,000 other people who are here one day out of the year. And I have a meeting every 15 minutes with people from home who are here on that one issue. So the chances that you will be forgotten after you have left the room are pretty high. That's why you need to come back. And you need to come back. And after a while, the senator begins to think, you know, there's this fellow that runs a community college, and yeah, I like him. He's been here 3 or 4 or 5 times. He always has something worthwhile to say. He doesn't waste my time. And yeah, so when the word is coming that you are coming, the reaction will be, oh, good, be glad to see him. But boy, I have a friend who's an actor, and to just put it in a play picked out of the air, he'd say, well, this is the 500th time I have done Phantom of the Opera, and it's getting pretty boring. But for the housewife from Keokuk, Iowa, who has saved her money and get together a group of her friends and come to New York for a theater weekend, she has never seen Phantom of the Opera, and she's sitting out there all a-tingle. And I'd better make sure that tonight's performance is as exciting as the opening night, because for her, it is the opening night. And I used to say to myself, oh, gee, look at this afternoon. All of the people are coming in, and then realize, yeah, but for the person who has gotten an airplane ticket and flown here from Panguitch, Utah, after driving all the way to Salt Lake to get on the plane, and is going to have his moment with the senator, I'd better be as interested and as alert and as excited about what he has to tell me, because he's going to go back home to Panguitch and tell everybody what it was like to see Senator Bennett. So the good member will do everything he or she can to act interested. But sandwiched in with all of the rest of the day, chances are he may not be. I'm just telling it to you as it is. You're a bunch of educators, so I won't say like it is, because you're properly schooled in English. However, you have a message that is vital. Your subject is certainly current, and education is an issue that every member of Congress needs to pay attention to. So be crisp and understand the next rule of lobbying. Never ask a member to do anything that's not in his best interest. Don't go in and say, now, this is what we need, and we know you hate it, but let us explain to you why we're right and you're wrong. You don't get very far that way. And as people would come to me and say, well, I have this, how do we sell this? And I said, the first question is, how will Congressman X benefit if he does what you're asking him to do? Well, gee, I don't know. Well, figure it out. Find something in the request you are making that will help the congressman in his career. Maybe it's a speech before a group that he's been unable to reach that is interested in this. Hey, you know, you'll put me before a group that can be helpful to me in my next election. Study the congressman's background. He has a great interest in X. We happen to have a course at our community college in X. We happen to have a group of people for whom this is an important part of their academic study. Pitch your request to him in terms of his interest. The paradigm example of how not to do it was a group that went in to see a very conservative, very defense-oriented Republican who was a solid supporter of President George W. Bush's. And the group had an issue that they wanted to raise, and they went in, and this is what we need, and the member was responding, yeah, okay, I understand. Well, and this is what we can do, yeah, good. And furthermore, this is why it's beneficial, okay, and it's going really well. And they're thinking, by George, you know, this guy is not as opposed to us as we thought he would be. And then one member of the delegation, calling on the congressman, said, and furthermore, Congressman, we know exactly how to pay for this so that it won't cost any money. And the congressman says, really? Now you really have my attention. And he says, absolutely. Just get out of Iraq and you can save all that money. Well, that was kind of the wrong thing to say to that particular congressman who was strongly in support of President Bush's initiative in Iraq. And that was the end of the lobbying effort. Don't bring up any extraneous items that don't have anything to do with what you're talking about, but happen to be your enthusiasm of something that the congressman can do. Don't try to do his job for him. And that's it's not one of the rules of lobbying. I've given you the two ironclad ones: always have good information and never ask a member of Congress to do anything that's not in his best interest.